Always been, my theory on art has always been this, and I get into trouble sometimes with it. Uh, and it's this, it's that art doesn't belong to anybody. It kind of comes out of the ether, you know, it's out there in the universe, it's part of the integral part of who we are, and it's passed along a chain. You know, the writer gets the art kind of through them, and they create, they're the prism to which it finds a real, tangible existence on the page. But then they pass it on to a director, either in the theater or film or wherever, who finds the story in there, finds a way to articulate it, and gathers a team together to all the tools to help tell that story. But then the director passes it on to the actors, right, who breathe life into it. They try and find truth and truthful motivation in imaginary circumstances to create a living character. They play actions, butting against other characters' actions to create truth out of that, a truthful moment, and therefore create a living character that doesn't really exist. That's their job. But then guess what? They don't have it for very long either, because then they have to pass it on. And in film, it would then get passed on to the editor, who adds their kind of assemblage of it. And in theater, it would then get passed to the final point, which is the audience. The audience is the final arbiter of what the story is, what it means, what the truth of it is. They're the final creator of the art.
He said the artist puts out 60% of the thought, and the other 40% is finished by the audience. See, Russ has tremendous respect for his audience, and he's like, I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to let you piece it together. I'm going to let you finish it.
As a moviegoer, I appreciate that kind of respect that a writer, director, producer says, okay, I've gotten you this far. Now take the movie and go home with it and keep it with you for a while and think about what happened. When you leave a movie like that, it stays with you much longer. Then you put a cap on it, it's over, and you go home and forget about it. So as a movie fan, as a movie watcher, I really appreciate that when a director says, when a writer or an actor like Russ says, here's the movie, it's not over, you finish it.
Otherwise, write yourself a book, and go sit in a room and read your own book. If you're not going to give it to an audience, and you're not going to care what anybody else thinks, and it's all about your thing, and you own it, then you might as well go sit and read your own work in a dark room somewhere. Ultimately, the audience gets it. So it comes from the universe, it goes through the writer, to the director, to the actors, the editor, the audience. And nowhere along that chain does anybody own it. Writers want to say, well, I wrote it. It's my story. Yeah, I guess. You were the prism for it, but you don't own it. It's not your thing. And the director wants to say, well, it's my vision. It's only mine. Okay. Good luck with that thought process, because you don't own it. And the actors say, well, I created this character. And ultimately, everybody wants so desperately to own a piece of it, but it's like being a parent and saying, my son is going to do this, this, and this, and that's the end of it. Well, that's not real effective parenting. At some point, they're their own human being, and they go off, and you were the conduit to which you nurtured it and you let it go. And that's what art is. Art is this place where you are who you were meant to be, a creator. So in that, you have to create, be a conduit for creation, be a conduit for inspiration. You're inspired by something else, but then you do your best and you let it go.
The other thing he said to me, he says, no filmmaker can ever own his vision. He has to hand it over to the audience and let them interpret it. And whatever they interpret is what it is. Because a movie that's seen by 300 people is really 300 different movies. And I always thought that was a remarkable way to look at it.
And that, to me, is art. That's the difference between art and craft. The poetry or the poem, art or the craft. One is the concrete kind of nuts and bolts, the craft, but the art is out there. It doesn't belong to anybody. And it's best when it's raw. It's best, to me, in my personal taste, it's best when it's not meticulous and perfect and everything is just right. I got no patience for that. I could care less about that. I like it like life. art is a raw thing. It's not brain surgery. You know, I often get criticized for not being too detail oriented, but to me, the truth is not in the details. You know, the truth is the truth, and you see it or you don't. That's what art is.